Hey everybody, Mr. Militich here, coming at you with the week 7 lecture slides. We're going to be talking about foreign policy this week, so let's get right to it. All right, so for our agenda, we're going to do a brief check-in, we're going to do some housekeeping notes, then we'll dive right into the foreign policy lecture. Then we'll discuss about the 2 homework assignments, foreign aid, and the foreign policy hypothetical assignment. I'm really excited for these assignments. I think they're really interesting and a lot of fun, so hopefully you will too. So for a check-in, again, like every week, not a whole lot's happened, with us having to be in quarantine and not going out too much. But I did have the opportunity to go on a hike over the weekend, and I had a really great time. I went out to a place called Annapolis Rock, which is part of the Appalachian Trail. So here are some pictures from that hike. That's kind of towards the beginning of the hike going up. That's a picture of the rock cliff that you can kind of look out from. I didn't really put the pictures of like the actual vista that I was looking from those rocks, because it was kind of hard to fit in on the slides. But it was a really great hike. Hiked for about 4 hours. It was really great. Got a few blisters, but it was still quite lovely. For those of you who are curious, Annapolis Rock is kind of out in like central western Maryland. So I put a map here for you to give you some reference. So Eleanor Roosevelt is here, in Greenbelt, right near College Park. Here's the DC line here. The DC looks like a diamond. That's the top of the diamond. And then you would go all the way up here for Annapolis Rock. So it's about a 45-minute car drive. So it's a little bit of ways. But if you have the opportunity, if you and your family are looking to do something fun or an outside, that'd be a really great thing to do. Would highly recommend. Okay, a few housekeeping notes. So there is a discussion this week. I'll move my picture for now. There is a discussion this week. So we are going to be discussing the pros and cons of foreign aid. So I want you to be prepared for that. So the discussion will be tomorrow, Thursday. And in order to participate in the discussion, you must read both articles and fill out the first half of the first assignment. Assignment 1 being the foreign aid articles. I want everybody to come prepared for the discussion this week, because it would be much more fruitful if everyone reads the articles and kind of comes informed about their own opinions and are ready to discuss it. And I'm putting a requirement on attending discussion this week, almost like an entrance ticket, if you will. You must turn in the first assignment before into Google Classroom. That's what the GC stands for, Google Classroom. You must turn it into Google Classroom before you attend discussion. Now, if you look at the assignment, the first half of it is quite quick. I'm just asking you to state your initial opinion, read the articles, and jot down a few notes. It's quite quick. But I want to make sure that everyone is prepared for the discussion. So in order to get credit for the discussion, you must turn in this assignment before you attend the discussion tomorrow. All right, some other housekeeping notes. Hopefully you saw the Google Classroom post I made yesterday, but I wanted to make it clear to everybody that any assignment can be submitted late. I do put a due date on things to kind of help pace you out in these assignments. But if you missed any assignment for any reason, you can turn it in late without any late penalty, right? All of this distance learning stuff is very new to a lot of us, and I know it's particularly taxing on y'all. So I want to make the grading opportunities available to everybody, right? I want everybody to be able to earn the passing grade for this quarter. So any assignment can be submitted late. Just turn it in and I'll grade it. And to that end, any assignment can be redone for more points. So if you did an assignment and you did not get a good grade, you can redo it to try to earn more points. Right? Thankfully, Google Classroom tracks all that stuff really well. So if you resubmit an assignment, I get a notification. So if you resubmit it to do a better job on it, and I will give you more points. If you're looking at an assignment and you're not sure as to why you got a bad grade, then just feel free to email me and we'll go over it together and I'll explain how you can earn more points. All right, so I want this is available to everybody and I want you to feel like you can keep trying for the better grades, keep turning in assignments. The stakes this quarter are very low, so take advantage of it. Okay, weekly overview. So this week, we're going to be talking about foreign policy. We talked about domestic policy yesterday. I looked at a lot of your campaign artifacts, whether it was a poster or a video or a TikTok. They were a lot of fun, and I hope you had a good time doing that. So we're going to be talking about foreign policy. You have 2 assignments this week, the foreign aid articles and the foreign policy scenario. I'll go over those more in depth after the lecture. Both assignments are required this week. Both assignments are required this week. I know usually I say you can completely replace one assignment if you attend discussion. However, if you are attending discussion, like I said earlier, I do want you to do some of the work within this assignment here, foreign aid articles. Right. It's less work for the assignment one being foreign aid articles, if you attend the discussion. And the discussion times, honors, you will be 11 to 11:45 tomorrow, Thursday. And my comprehensive sections, you will be 12:15 to 1 p.m. All right, let's jump into foreign policy. We talked about how the government handles lots of different issues, lots of different areas of responsibilities, and they can be broken down into 2 different areas. We talked about domestic policy last week, which is anything that happens at home or within the country, within the United States. Now we're going to be talking about foreign policy, which is anything dealing with relationships with other countries. So any sort of dealings the United States has with one country or several countries. So to give you a clear definition, what is foreign policy? Foreign policy is the strategies and goals that guide a nation's relations with other countries around the world. Right? I know my little bar there is blocking it, but it just says around the world. So if foreign policy is all about accomplishing the goals that countries have in relationships with other countries, what are America's goals? Well, America's goals can be broken down into several different categories. National security, meaning how do we keep our nation safe from attacks from other countries? Economic interest, how do we better trade through imports and exports, which I'll explain in a little bit. How can we get more money and keep doing better economically in our relationships with other countries? World peace, of course. One of America's goals is to make sure that there's peace around the world, that there are not tyrants oppressing their people or committing human rights violations, which kind of falls into the next 2 categories. Promoting democracy. Right, the United States believes that democracy is the best form of government, and we want to promote those ideas of everybody having a voice in their government, the people having the power, and not just a few. Right, we want to try to convince other countries that that's the best way of doing things. And a concern for humanity, right? Human rights violations. If there are people being slaughtered abroad, the United States tends to try to step in to try to prevent that. Not always, but on many occasions they do. So to accomplish these goals, the United States uses different tools, right? Just like at home, if you're doing a home improvement project, if you're fixing the plumbing, if you're fixing a hole in the wall, right, you have different tools to accomplish those tasks. So the way the United States accomplished its foreign policy goals are through these different tools, right? Diplomacy, economics, and military intervention. Right? These are the 3 categories of tools that the United States uses to accomplish its foreign policy goals. So diplomacy. Diplomacy is all about countries talking to each other, coming to agreements, right? This is why I have a picture of the 2 people holding hands, right? It's about peacefully talking out your problems, working out a solution through diplomatic relations, meaning countries talking and forming relationships with each other. These can take place with negotiations and agreements, right? The talking. And formally, this could look like a treaty, right? We've talked about treaties before, but to reiterate, a treaty is a formal agreement between nations, right? These treaties can look like peace agreements if the countries were at war. These treaties could be trade agreements. They can look like lots of different things. But some more specific language, right? A bilateral agreement or a bilateral treaty would be an agreement between two nations. So the United States and Canada, right? If they were at war, right, they could come to an agreement, a bilateral agreement to say, hey, we're going to end this war. A multilateral agreement, kind of like the word implies, multi, is an agreement between multiple nations, meaning more than two. Right? And the United States is involved in many multilateral agreements, which we will talk about below. So another big diplomacy tool is membership in international organizations. Right? In order for the United States to talk with people, right, we often join these organizations, these societies of countries, so that we can send diplomats, send ambassadors, which are people who represent the United States abroad. And we talk. We talk about issues, we get together. And one of the big ones is the United Nations. Right? The United Nations is an international organization represented by most countries around the world. I think there are like 3 countries that aren't represented because they haven't had good relationships really with any country, North Korea being a prime example. Right. But the United Nations does a lot to try to promote peace, to try to promote economic prosperity to all countries around the world. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, right? This is a military alliance of many countries in Europe as well as the United States. International Monetary Fund, right? This is a kind of a banking organization that tries to supply money to third world countries. And of course, the World Health Organization. You've probably been hearing a lot about this in the news because the World Health Organization is the international group of doctors and scientists that try to promote health around the world. Right? They are good about identifying diseases, doing research on vaccines, and trying to stop the spread of diseases like the coronavirus. They're doing a lot of work right now to try to advise countries to say, hey, you should be implementing these measures to try to keep your country safe. You should try to limit travel to these countries, right? They're an international group of doctors and scientists. Okay, economic tools. Economic tools, as the picture implies, is all about the money. The money, because the United States does a lot of economic exchanges with other countries, right? Trade being the most prominent example. Right? Trade is when the United States will give goods to one country for a price, and another country will give us goods for a price. Right? Imports, right, are the resources that countries bring in to the country from abroad. So, for example, if the United States really loves wine, right, and oftentimes we import wine from other countries, France, Australia, Italy, Germany, even, right? These countries will sell us wine. That is an import. So we give them money, they give us stuff. Export is the exact opposite. It's what the country sells to another person. For example, the United States grows a lot of corn and cotton. So we export corn and cotton to other countries. And they in turn pay us for that. So the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, is an agreement between the United States, Canada, and Mexico to say that we are not going to put any extra taxes or any heavy restrictions on the trade of goods between these three countries, the United States and its two neighbors, Canada and Mexico. It is a multilateral, meaning multiple countries, trade agreement between these three countries. People still use the name NAFTA, but technically the agreement has been renamed to the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. When President Trump renegotiated the deal, he's been renegotiating the deal for the past couple of years, but it's officially been put into action this past March of 2020. So it's fairly new. But this is an agreement between nations to trade freely, because there's an understanding that free trade amongst these countries is good for everybody, right? If the United States is buying stuff from Mexico, that means the United States is getting stuff that we need, and Mexico gets money. If Canada buys stuff from us, that means Canada is getting what they need in terms of resources, and the United States is in turn making money, right? It's all a good thing. So another economic tool that the United States uses is something called foreign aid, right? This is a big controversial topic in the foreign policy realm, and we're going to dive into it in our one of our assignments this week. So foreign aid is giving money to struggling countries to build up their governments and improve relationships. So the United States has money, lots of countries have money, and so oftentimes they give some money to other countries that are struggling. For example, in the past, the United States has given a lot of money to countries in Central and South America, right? Countries like Guatemala and Honduras and El Salvador, right? The United States gives the government money to try to make their country and their societies better with their infrastructure and their police force, typically. Right, but the issue is controversial, as you can imagine, because where does any money from the United States come from? Right, it's taxes. So a lot of people don't like the idea of the United States spending United States people's money, taxpayers' money, like you and I, in another country, because they didn't pay that taxes. So why should they benefit from it? Shouldn't we be benefiting from it because it's our money that our government collects? Right. So that would be people against foreign aid would say that. People for foreign aid would say, well, these governments need help. And if their government fails, if their government collapses and there's no government, well, the problems of that country may come and hurt the United States. Right. So we'll read about that in some articles when you complete your assignments. Very interesting stuff. All right. So some more economic tools. Right, this would be the aggressive economic tools, or ways you could punish countries using economics. Right, it's called sanctions. Sanctions are actions used to punish other countries economically, right, including withholding loans and restricting trade, certain aspects of trade like weapons. Right, the United States could suspend selling weapons to another country if they believe that what that country is doing wrong. So, for example, if France decides to attack Germany for whatever reason, right? They're both our allies, but if France decides to attack Germany, right, the United States could say, okay, well, France, we are not going to sell you weapons, and we are not going to trade with you because you are doing something that we do not like. You are attacking an ally of ours. So we will not trade you weapons. We won't trade you important electronics to help fund your military, right? The stopping of trade would be a sanction, right? An embargo would be an extreme example of that, which is banning all trade with another nation, right? The United States famously has an embargo with Cuba, right? So back in the 1960s, JFK instituted an embargo against Cuba because the United States wanted to stop the spread of communism at that time. And they did not like that the Cubans had a communist revolution in the 1950s and 60s. So the United States completely banned trade with Cuba, which is why it's technically illegal to buy Cuban cigars. You can't buy anything from Cuba. And it wasn't even until recently that people from the United States could even go to Cuba. For a very long time, people of the United States were not allowed to even visit or vacation in Cuba, right? Because that's part of the embargo. All right, moving on to military tools. So military tools involves, the United States military, the use of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, right, in case of conflict. So alliances would be a military tool, which says that if you establish an alliance with another country, you are saying that you are friends with that nation, and that if that nation is attacked, you will come to their defense. You will help them out. So, for example, if Russia decides to invade Canada, right, the United States has an alliance with Canada, and so the United States would send military support, would send the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and all of its other military tools to help Canada because we are in an alliance. Right, NATO, which I mentioned earlier, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, right, is an alliance between 29 countries to be allies in the event of an attack. Basically saying an attack on one is an attack on all. So if you're a little country, that maybe doesn't have a great military, something to be a part of like NATO would be really great, because that means that if somebody attacks you, that means you have the support of 28 other countries. So a lot of countries in Europe and the United States are part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So if somebody attacks the United States, right, if Russia, for example, decides to attack the United States, then countries like the UK, France, Germany, Spain, all of them would have to come and help the United States, send military support to help us. Right, so other examples of military tools, right, blockades, which is when the United States would send the Navy and the Air Force and the Army to block off certain areas that the foreign enemy would import items from. So, for example, the United States could block a harbor, it could block an important port, right, to try to prevent troops from moving in, to try to prevent supplies from moving in, right? This would be a very aggressive action that the United States takes. Right, we talk about paramilitary operations, right, which is something like spies, the Navy SEALs, if we send in like secret units to try to, the United States doesn't typically do assassinations, right? We're technically not allowed to do assassinations, right? But that would be an example of a paramilitary operation. The United States sending in a secret unit to try to sabotage, to try to assassinate, to try to obfuscate the enemy country. And then you would have just straight up military interventions, right? Which would be invading a country. So the United States sending the military, sending the Army, the Navy, the Air Force into a country to try to prevent them from doing what they're doing. Okay, so that's all the different examples of foreign policy tools, right? We have the three categories of military, diplomacy, and economic tools. So hopefully you took notes on that, because you'll be needing them for your assignment. So if you haven't taken any notes, I would highly recommend going back and jotting down a few notes. But we're going to press on with talking about the assignments. So for the foreign aid assignment, like I said earlier, it's a very controversial topic, right? Spending U.S. money in other nations. So some see it as an essential tool. Some people see it as a waste of money. So I want to hear your opinions. So you're going to read two articles from both sides of the debate and formulate your own opinion about foreign aid. So in the assignment in Google Classroom, you're going to write down your initial opinion, right? Write down any initial thoughts you have before you read the articles. Then you're going to read the articles, and then you're going to write down your opinion after reading the articles. Address whether it's changed, whether it's been reinforced, right? And then using textual evidence to show me what has convinced you. And again, this part, wait for my little black bar to go away. So this part, the reflection part, the writing your opinion afterwards, is optional if you attend the discussion. right? This reflection for this assignment is a little lengthier, so I would highly advise you coming to the discussion if you don't feel like writing. However, if you don't attend the discussion, then you will have to do this second half of this assignment. All right, assignment 2, foreign policy hypothetical. I'm very excited for this assignment. I think it's super fun, and I'm very interested to read how you all will handle this. So essentially, you are going to pretend to be the president of the United States, right? We're going to present you with a scenario, and you are going to have to tell me what you would do in this case, in this instance. You're going to have to tell me what foreign policy tools you would use and why. The scenario in this case is the United States wanting to stop Brazil from burning down their rainforest, right? And this is a real issue that's happening today. The Brazilian government is taking a lot of actions to burn and chop down the rainforest to make room for more human development. But the rainforest is a super important aspect for the world environment, right? The rainforest provide a lot of oxygen. It takes a lot of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, which we know is important. So your goal is to stop Brazil from chopping down their rainforest, and so you're going to tell me what foreign policy tools you would use to try to prevent that. Right? So you're going to read through the scenario, choose which foreign policy tools you would use, and then explain why you would use those tools. All right, pretty simple. I'm very excited to see how you all will deal with it. Alrighty, so in closing, again, to parse it all out, foreign policy deals with other countries, domestic policy deals with issues at home, right? Foreign policy is abroad with other nations, domestic policy is at home here in the United States. Again, as a reminder, the discussion times, honors 11 to 11:45 Thursday. Comprehensive, you will be 12:15 to 1 p.m. on Thursday. And I hope to see you all there. But in the meantime, keep at it. We're almost at the finish line. We only have one more full week to go after this. So we're almost done with this crazy distance learning experiment. But until then, keep at it. Keep your chin up. Try to stay motivated. I know it's tough, right? Darn tootin'. All right, y'all have a great week and hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.